2023. 2000, 20,000, 2000, 20,023. Yeah, that'd be right? 2023, 20,000. Yeah. That's the way it's going to go today. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us live. If you're watching us on Roku, Google, Amazon, Apple, or Samsung TV, thank you so much for seeing me 16 by 9 on probably a bigger screen than I should be on. For those of us watching live simulcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube, thank you so much for that as well. And also Twitch, in case you're using your gaming console. I think we covered all the bases. My name is Loren Gray. I'm the host of the show. Given circumstances yesterday, I had a completely different topic for today's show and changed it with a little mixture of what I was still going to talk about based on some events that happened yesterday. So my topic today for discussion is mid-year budgets, forecasts, and marketing changes. We're in the middle of the year, literally middle of the year, within a few days, of course. We got past the optimism of what we thought 2023 was going to be in our budgeting process last year, or forecast towards the end of last year. We had the typical roller coaster of things. You've heard me complain about or comment about this before, where we're going to sustain a 4 to 7% growth, 9%, 8%, whatever it is, the number that was attested to. After the first quarter, all the prognosticators begin to temper that down. Some maintained it because of the pace of the business for September for certain markets. I think that's one always caveat that we have to give any generalized forecasting is based on the region that you're in, there's a validity or not validity. When you homogenize too much data to umbrella too many people, you get a very fuzzy indicator as it relates to you directly. So, second quarter, there was some mixed events that happened with forecasting. And that was you had very specific regions that had a stellar summer performance beyond what was originally thought to have happened. And most people's forecast for 2023 had a heavy burden on summers for most people that had summer cycle. Not as much on spring, although spring did relatively well. And very pessimistic forecasting for the latter part of the year. So where we are mid-year is usually the time where people make their adjustments as to what they think the rest of the year is going to be like. Again, a mixed crowd on conversations as to how they think the year is going to end. For those people that did not have a strong summer, it's downturning faster and larger. For those that had a decent summer to good summer, they're still not upticking their latter part of the year. Why aren't they? Well, flight prices are down 13% year over year. Gas prices, although having crept up just recently, have been, and they love making this in the news, substantially down compared to same time last year. So that affects two means of one aspect of travel, which is your transportation cost associated with your vacation. We've certainly on the show broken down the usual methodology of determining travel budgets based on demographics, based on your particular property. The 4 segments of a person's budget being transportation cost, accommodation cost, food cost, entertainment cost. Those are the basic 4. And with transportation costs being down, then that means there's money to spend on the other 3. We as hospitality have not really lowered our rates. We've optimized them even harder and higher under the optimism that we can yield even farther and more. So some of that money that was saved in transportation may have moved over to accommodations, or they still might have adjusted their duration of stay or distance of travel according to the prices that we were dictating on our accommodations. You will be able to tell about your property in particular. That being said, that's the forecasted prognostications of what's going on this year. When we made these forecasts, they were based on budgets we made last year. And as we notoriously talk about every year, we have a budget season. And it's going to start next month. It's going to start in August. And as we've said so many years before through the 10 years of doing this show every week, is that we're going into the first phase of budgeting, which is the identification and data collection. What did we really do? How did we really do it? Sources of business and so forth. Unfortunately, before all of that at an operational or property level happens, the conversation is already happening up farther in the food chain. And that is the required need to show financial progress to either current investors, future investors, or growth patterns that they've decided. As with any of those things, optimism and positive numbers breeds investment or expansion of monies. Um, Often people think that if businesses are profitable, the profits are what are used to expand the business. Yes, as a leveraging tool for more financial notes to be made. Here's where we run into a lot of bit of a wall. Interest rates are at an all-time, well, not all-time high, at a decade-long plus high. And for those that don't have incredibly large credit capabilities to try to knock that down at all, it's still high because base interest rate is so high. So even those that have great credit or great relationships with banks or have their own ability to create notes with financial institutions, they still are hitting the wall that's going to cost them more to do so. That taps the brakes for a lot of expanded development. That has to be weighed on the projections of revenue for the project that they would be willing to take the increased cost risk for to finance, to have built or buy. That's where forecasting comes in, and budgets. Budgets try to create that optimism that those properties, as they're being operated, are great investments for people that have money to invest with, or companies that are in the business, like REITs and so forth, that they invest more money because there's more opportunity, more what's in the pipeline. Oftentimes, from property level, you get frustrated, like, why are they building another hotel in our market? We don't need another hotel in the market. I'm not full. Why is it that we have to have another hotel? Because it's investment opportunities, brick and mortar investments based on what they're affiliated with, usually brands, because that's the most direct way of convincing banks and financial institutions that there's a viability of the business's success because brand supports it and brand is not shy about trying to push that topic to a higher level. So all that's going on right now. All those discussions about how finances have landed so far, the mid-year mark, compared to what they told financial investment firms what they were doing. Does it validate the security of their investments? Does it incite them to invest more? For those people that are looking for next year and how that relates to this year, now that we're closer to next year, how does that affect their outlook for next year as well? And again, going back to my statement that profits don't build businesses, profits leverage them. Those profits, net profits after EBITDA down to cash flow, all of your operational costs past EBITDA and beyond, that net contribution back in isn't the money that goes back into the company per se. That gets distributed to ownerships as value of return of investment to some degree. And the other is that it leverages the capability of the institution that's running, operating, or owning the properties to get more loans. And as I just mentioned, those loans are more expensive. So all these are a mixture of finances. And all of this is based on literally the validation or ability to validate the budgets as they're forecasted. Now, keep in mind, we're in July of 2023. We're going to go into August of 2023 where we begin this process of budgeting. The budget process will come to most likely its inevitable conclusion in and about October. Standard budget season, August through October. Same too happened last year for this year. Did you really know this time last year where we would be this year? Well, you have a sense. And obviously, it's not just sitting back and having an opinion about your business. It's about evaluating the numbers associated with your business. And as we've talked about so many times with the budgeting process and the data collection right now, all the departments are gathering what they need to contribute to this process. Sales is going over and looking at what business reoccurred, what business is not going to reoccur for next year. What is the opportunity of the business growth in your market? What is the opportunity of gathering L&R accounts, local negotiated rate accounts with local businesses and or consortia relationships? What is it going to take to get more business from them? What kind of rates do we have to offer into the mix of what revenue needs to be generated? All going back to the dictation of the ownership is to their expectations of growth. It is one of the more annoying features that ownership expects artificially that every month will be better than the previous, every year will be better than the previous, and that there's nothing but an upward growth. Anything that is a plateau, or as heaven forbid, anything that is a reduction, is despised. Now, any investor would say the same. Obviously, if I invested in something, I expect it to be of value. What they've long since stopped doing is assessing the asset value associated to their growth pattern. Asset values according to demand. If I build a hotel in a location and it's growing as business, I'm looking at that revenue to go back into the system, also be able to create more financing capabilities on my part. And the asset, the brick and mortar asset, I expect to grow just like you buy a house and it grows. It grows hopefully because demand continues to go up and the interest and the potential of somebody next after you buying it also maintains a higher level. But what happens if you build a hotel in a business in an area that it became oversaturated and or the business demand to that market shifted, and now you own a building that nobody wants to go to, ghost town? Well, now that changes the asset value. These are the things that plague investors because they don't want to be caught holding the bag when the music stops on a property that they've invested monies into. The real owner of those properties are the banks that carry the notes, and we're seeing a large flux of things happening with banks. It's not just the fact of whether someone qualifies to take a loan out for a business such as a hotel or a restaurant or what have you, and have that based upon their ability to pay that note back and all the interest that's being asked of it and so forth. The bank is evaluating their exposure to those assets because they're the ones that actually spend the money, give the money for the process to be done. And we know that there's a huge hill that's happening to a lot of banking institutions here in the fiscal year of 2024 coming up to 2025. And that is they're carrying a lot of notes for office space, urban areas. Some urban areas are beginning to come back. We see in the news that companies are beginning to push people back to coming to the office to work. There's the pushback of wanting people to continue to work from home, so forth and so on. That dynamic, because of the lockdown, is very fluid right now. So from this, banks are being very critical of what it is that they are actually giving monies to. It has to be a little bit more in the direction of stability and long-term value rather than risk factor. That's the big thing you always hear in investments is the risk factor associated with it. Why am I bringing all this up when we're talking about hotels, marketing, budgets, and what have you? Because this influences the chaotic requests or the apparent chaotic requests of you as a property. You're grinding the day to day. You're doing good business. You actually can see your year over year being substantially better. 23 over 22 for most people in most markets we have clients for, especially, are better. However, they've been persistently running behind the budget they were given. Now, you often say, well, there's investment from the properties, they have to buy in, they have their chance to defend why they don't think the budget is realistic. Yeah, it's all lip service for the most part. If it's determined what's needed financially in the sense of growth, and they have to substantiate that with the potentialities, and they have to validate. They just can't make up. Well, that's not true. They actually do make up numbers. They have to somehow validate the numbers they've made up with those people that write checks to them, banks in particular, that it's doable. They have to show projections, forecasts, demands to market. So I know I do those audits. I get hired to develop the market profile for companies to tell them the inventory availability into a market, the potential, what revenue would be charged for that, the potential, what market asset value would be related to that, what segmentation would it be serving to, and what the potential revenue is based on the number of keys they're making. I do that. I build that. All being said, once that's validated, for the other properties that are already operating and they're being told what they need to forecast for next year, is the very much unrealistic, like, oh my gosh. And the property can balk back and say that's unrealistic or this isn't. At the end of the day, they still have to swallow the budget. They just have to be told which month they want to do the painful pills on, because there's always months that they feel like they can succeed at the numbers that are given to them. And how much more can they sandbag past that to maybe make up for the months that they know that the budget is completely unrealistically expected. And that's what we're facing now. If I look at a lot of my clients' budgets that I work with them on, their year over year is doing great. Some months, good. Some months, woo, just barely. But overall, yes. But their budgets, they've had their moments where maybe they broke budget 1 or 2 months out of the past 6. Most of them are woefully behind. And if you looked at aggregate scorecard where properties are up to, most of them are behind. Not all. Obviously, there's exceptions. As much as I homogenize data, you lose the edges of extremes compared to the median. But overall, there's these challenges. Okay, so that's budgets. Let's talk about forecasts. Forecasts are a more granular, forward-rolling perspective of what's going to happen. I've often touted that anything within 30 days better be within 4% of accuracy 30 days out. You should be within 4% or less of exactly what you're going to do 30 days from that date. Not 4% within the next 7 days. You would maybe 100% on those. But you should be within 4% of everything every 30 days. A good revenue manager should do that. And gosh knows there's enough tools out there now that literally hold your hand and tell people, this is the price you should have, and this is what you should offer, and so forth. and they're too trusted to do so. And a lot of times people are being put in the roles that they don't have a full education as to what they can do and should do in that role, but they assume the title and they run the process. I'm not being bitter about something, it's a reality. These automation tools simplify the job so that lower cost people can be put into the position. And basically, as long as they can push buttons and understand the numbers in a way that they can translate that to others, they're fulfilling the job. They're not the same revenue managers that developed the discipline 15 years ago. And that's because automation, I'm not condemning anyone, automation, algorithms, services, SaaS services that are being offered to revenue managers. For those that just recently went to high tech, there was dozens of companies through money rows that offered revenue management services. And fortunately, one thing we've learned out of the pandemic is the reduction of siloed operations between revenue management, marketing, operations, and so forth. There was a collaborative communication. We're seeing chief commerce officers come out of that new title for people that are aggregate over all of that. So here we are talking about forecasts, the accurate interpretation of now current information related to the next 30, 60, 90 days. 90 days is really just seeing if you have to move the stick in the sand on the tide mark as to whether or not it's close to what you still had budgeted or whether or not it's shifted dramatically because of certain circumstances. 60 days out, you're really honing down what you should begin to prepare for: costings, labors, scheduling of repairs and so forth because of expected occupancies. 30 days in, you should be all about every day, how it is, what is going on, where that's coming from, conclusions of group contracts and so forth. That's usually the process of revenue management for forecasting. And marketing. Marketing should be rolling into their final phase of their push to click, push to convert functionality with a lot of the things within a 30-day window. Actually, within 21-day window would be better to say. And that is the focusing of the efforts to conclude all of the work they've done up to and driving the audiences to the point that they're trying to convince them of the acquisition. And if they haven't already convinced them of the acquisition, reaffirm those that have been acquired already to revalidate that they don't need to change their decision. And also reconnect with the people that are cycling through that just stayed and recultivating their lifetime value in that process. Those are the three phases of marketing. So forecasts should be about that intermediary function. So now we have the premise of all the reasons why we're talking about these things today between mid-year budgets, forecasts, and marketing changes. Mid-year now, we've weathered, metaphorically and realistically, through a variety of things that every year brings, some variations and so forth. I would have to say, without hesitation, weather has become a predominant influence on travel and marketing decisions, without a doubt. The stupidity of people thinking there was no climate change and stupid government people that were political roles that were putting blind eyes and so forth has not helped the situation. And we are facing shifts in the severity of things. It's not that it doesn't get cold where it used to get cold. It's not that it doesn't get hot where it used to get hot. It's hotter there where it used to be hot. I know that from being in Southwest Florida. And it's colder in places that get colder. And storms that used to be storms are now much more severe, much more long lasting. We're looking at here in Florida in particular, the warm water, and we're going into what will be the peak of hurricane season come September. And warm water is literally fuel sitting on the surface waiting for a hurricane to suck it up. We're going through the seasonality, what usually happens in July and August, where Saharan dust knocks off some of the wind shearing or the capabilities of weather to form. We get very dry, very hot down here, but you're looking at the southwest of the United States. Hot is hot, but that's hotter. The fact that Las Vegas is going to possibly hit its all-time record of 134 degrees this weekend. The fact that Death Valley, which everyone knows is the hottest place on Earth, it might hit its the highest temperature of 160 something degrees. I forget what that one is. Pretty damn hot. Texas, everyone, you're dealing with a change in weathers. Why am I talking about weather on a marketing show? Because it affects our business. Strangely enough, and this goes into a combination of talking about GA4 and what we're into right now, is you're able to now to aggregate data that you didn't have before based on the metrics that you're getting from your Google Analytics. GA4 allows for everything to be tracked all at once. It also allows, based on its platform BigQuery, which is storage of data, the ability to aggregate other data sources through APIs, the easiest, fastest, best way of doing it, and bringing in that data which identifies things like weather. Strangely, we've started to do that. And uniquely, we're seeing that there's a correlation increase as to the weather of the source of the booking at the day of the booking compared to any weather variances at the destination upon arrival. So the instigation is when weather at certain ways happen, that can positively or negatively influence the purchase decision. When did we start thinking about this? We always knew this. Historically, we've talked about this before. Historically, from here in Florida, come the latter part of November, early December, we're in about the first, or not the first, but the final cold wave where it hits the Northeast and sticks. It's cold. It's going to forecast to stay cold. We're into winter, folks. It's now cold. It stays cold. It's not the cold goes back to warm, cold back to warm, which usually happens early November. Now it's cold. And that was our trigger to take all of our predetermined marketing for the Northeast of telling everybody they should now come to Florida because it's cold up there. Come on down, enjoy the sunshine and the warmth. That's when it triggered our business. So using weather as a catalyst or as a function of marketing is not a new thing. It's an old thing. The new thing is we get to really define the data now. It's not just us guessing. It's not us having an opinion. You know, those people, they're probably pretty tired of that weather. Let's go over and target that geography and send them something. Now we can see how weather affects. Now, this is the forensic data we have right now, the historical use of the weather during the days of. And it has everything from dew points to weather to tornado alerts, weather alerts, hurricane alerts, whatever it is. It just takes all the weather data and it puts it against your daily data as well. Well, it's fun in a simplistic way. It was sunny and 72 degrees and you had this occupancy in these ADRs. Is there a correlation? Probably, if you look overall everything, but just that as a slice is like, great, it's sunny 72. And this goes to what I have talked about before when I was GM. I used to have a daily GM log that I made everyone fill their comments in, and I would add them to my GM log, like Dear Diary, or ship's log, ship's log. And it really talked about the day. What I used to record was, where did we get our business from? What happened that day? What was the weather like that day? And it was really good because year over year, being able to look back at those logs, and I got thanked by GMs that took my chair at different hotels that there even existed, that they hadn't done that habit and they started doing it once they realized that it was so helpful for them, is to look back and say, okay, what are we looking at today? And look at last year. Obviously, there's a day shift, but looked at what was surrounding. Was it a bad weather week? Was it a good weather week? So forth and so on. We have that ability now that that's one less thing that you have to manually do and one thing that can be added into your data. But more importantly, getting ahead of weather. So let's stretch this out a little bit because we are talking about forecasting. And I'm not talking about forecasting weather, obviously, but I'm talking about forecasting business as it relates to our marketing for this year. We have a heat dome over the Southwest right now. It's affecting anything from Texas to California and up. It's affecting Florida as well, where I'm at. We're going to have other factors to it. But if you begin to know historically how weather affects the demand from market, and you already have your historical demand geographically, your feeder markets, term everyone should know, then looking at the forecasts of weather, the long range forecasts of how long is this heat dome going to last? Where's it going to move to? Who's going to continue to get affected? Where's the storm lines, like the tornadoes of spring and so forth? And the Midwest, the bad storms as the inversions between hot and cold air hit the Midwest. Those have an effect on people's desire to either not be there or in front of it, or not to travel to it. Those have an effect on travel decisions. Well, having that data, looking now forward into the weather that you're looking to forecast for, how does it affect your market strategy? If Dallas was a good feeder market for you, but it kind of tapered off come August because it's hot in Dallas, it's hot in Florida, so they're not going to come to Florida because it's just hot in Dallas, and even though we have the beaches, it's just not worth the effort to travel. But Dallas is still sitting at 110. Florida broke its heat and it's down to a more reasonable 90 something. It might have an influence on somebody's decision, and just as much as it might have influence on their decision to go to Colorado where it might be cooler, or Midwest, Minnesota, or Wisconsin because it might be cooler. It changes the pattern of interest, especially when you start looking at marketing from a demographic perspective, not just geographic, but also include the demographics to this. If people have the income level and the traveling means in the sense of their family composition, whether they have kids in school or not, or whether they're of a certain age, they travel certain distances, you now can open up the idea of focusing in on the demographics in general with specific focus on the geographies that have weather concerns that would change somebody's interest in being where they are at. Okay, to maybe visiting you, and you can make that targeting based on demographics. Beat the heat kind of stuff. Okay, just like we say, beat the cold. Um, Maybe considering the changes in travel opportunities because of new content that's available to people, markets that didn't see themselves as viable to solicit people to come to them, like, hey, we're in Duluth, Montana, making this up, nothing against Duluth. They don't compete with the big destination places. Okay, and so they don't market widely. They market to places that they know people travel from, and to usually drive market or something, because it's hard to fly to Duluth or whatever. But now, because of its good weather, or that it's not in the heavy tourist area where rates are higher, cost is higher, um, the ability to get there might be more expensive. But this is a viable alternative that maybe now there's an opportunity for markets that are not on the main road of tourism to speak up. We see this in Europe a lot, just recently having been there for many months, that there's an over tourism perspective, especially places like Amsterdam and Venice that are looking to ways to not actually solicit tourism. The tourism is changing the very culture of the cities that they're in. We've known this about Venice for a very long time. The oversaturation of tourists degrading the city. Amsterdam has its same issues. It's changing the business models of so many businesses to be only pure tourist, um, which it's catering to the business that can be sold, but that is destroying potentially the city and the reason why people go to it. It's the same cruise line effect that Key West had. The cruise lines, when they start coming to Key West, changed the very fabric of how Key West operates. These tourism saturated places are now featured in the news and so forth. And now this is a chance for other markets to say, hey, how about us? Why not us? And weather is a great catalyst to it. Tracking weather and looking at the impact of weather as to the demand from your market and its feeder markets that feed you, how whether or not to get ahead of that and make marketing choices, just like I talked about in late November, for when it gets permanently cold in the Northeast with that Florida Easter triggering forward. But let's get more granular about some things as to why I refer to market changes. We have the interest changes, which is going to change the financial structure of how people travel, whether they choose to buy a house or not buy a house, continue to rent, stay in the house that they're currently at because it has a lower mortgage rate note, which means it either may free up monies for them because they've just simply decided they're not going to get a house, or the inversion of that is it's going to buckle them down and keep them from spending money in the hopes that they can build up enough money to get over that hump and go to the next larger house because they have more monies to put towards it. It can go either way. It's a flip of a coin as to how those things happen to it. All said and done, there are certain market changes that are going to have a very strong influence on the latter half of this year, whether or not you see them related to you or not. It's the typical chaos theory. The fluttering of a butterfly's wings creates a storm on the other side of the world. We are just now looking, it's been newsworthy for a while. The writer's strike was one thing. And I started asking my clients, what are you doing for planning on October to drive people to do stuff locally? That have them come in and stay at the hotel. And because it's a great thing to do as an alternative to what they were doing. And I got asked naively, why would you be asking those kind of questions? I said, well, there's the writer's strike. Okay. Well, that's going to have an impact on the patterns and habits of our guests. For those that stay home and are contrived in watching shows and episodes of things and so forth, and don't feel the need to go out and do as much stuff because they're in the routines. We all have life daily routines, and their life daily routine is that this is when they watch TV. The kids watch TV. We do this. We're doing this. We're not. We go to the backyard. We do stuff. Whatever. Well, that's going to change their pattern because some shows at the time when it was just the Writers Guild were not going to be on schedule for their new episodes and seasons, which means there's going to be a lot of reruns. Now, some people, that's fine and well. It also might mean that there's a change in what they keep subscribed with. If they are, because streaming service, OTT and CTV is a huge thing, as you know, because you're watching it on your TV with me. Is maybe they won't keep that subscription to Paramount Plus for a few months until this blows over and they go back to putting the new shows back on. Maybe they'll drop Netflix for a while, or just the opposite. because there's a lack of new programming, they'll pick up subscriptions so that they can go over and watch shows that they haven't caught up with before, because it's just a bunch of reruns now for the most part. And that was a dialogue of like, well, it can go either way, yes and no, but also let's take advantage of the people that might be looking at the group of people that might be looking at, well, you know what, nothing's new on TV. My show's not going to come back for the fall season, the last part of the season, because they're, the writers are on strike at the time. And maybe let's go to the zoo and stuff. We haven't done that forever. Let's go to the zoo. Let's go to the water park. Let's go to this. Let's do that. Whatever. Build the market now, because doing it now means you're going to have an effect in September. Well, lo and behold, yesterday, the actors went on strike. And this gathered a lot of attention, as it should. It wasn't just the name actors that walked off. It's all actors. And you look at a movie like the Mission Impossible movie that's coming out, or the Oppenheimer movie, or whatever. And the fact that, and I never thought about this until it was in the news, these actors stopped going to the galas of the grand openings. I forget who it was off of, was it Oppenheimer? It was in London, the premiere. The actors and actresses were there, Matt Damon and so forth. And the strike was announced and they didn't go in to see the show. They left, which means that was the last premiere show of that with anybody there. Comic-Con, think about this. You're banking on the attendance of Comic-Con. And the actors, they're going to show up that play the characters of the shows you endear yourself to, that you do cosplay and everything else, and you buy your tickets, you have your hotel rooms and everything else. They're not there. So Comic-Con turns into a bunch of people talking amongst themselves, being able to buy stuff related to the shows they're endeared with no active programming. Nobody's on the stage that's an actor or a writer talking about the shows and giving insights and hints and so forth. All the people that love Marvel Comics and all the movies and Star Trek and everything else, it stopped. It's going to shift our demand to events that are related to them. It's going to shift if you're in markets that have scheduled shows that are produced there, like the Vancouvers, the Montreals in Canada, the Miamis, the Atlantas. Less Miami because DeSantis. Anyway, not being political. Anyways, now all of a sudden that demand or concentration of interest to market is gone because they stopped production of those things. That was with the Writers Guild. Now it's even more so with the actors. And this is the first time since back when Ronald Reagan was the president of the Actors Guild that this happened, that both were on strike at the same time. And to give you some sense of it, the Actors Guild is like 160,000 actors and actresses. The Writers Guild was around 13,000. So even though the writers had the strings of content, the actors are the ones that actually do the production. So now that ripples out to everybody. Why are we talking about these strikes? Because it's now going to legitimately affect our October businesses, our September businesses, our November businesses. Even if they fix it in the next day, 2 days, 3 days, weeks, whatever, the Writers Guild has already created the ball rolling of interrupting of scheduled redo of programs. Already, the actors now being on strike have created a snowball effect that's only going to get bigger as it goes downhill, of delays of so many things. Again, for the small people or the small destinations that are affecting the movie production schedules, that's one thing. The effect on the culture of not having that as the continued consumable content that our society produces, movies, episodic shows, so forth. And you say, and you can sit back and say, well, there's plenty of program. I haven't seen some shows that now there's a chance for catch up. You're absolutely right. But having friends that are retired, it's great when you think, well, when I retire, I'm not going to do this and this. Well, after you go to so many lunches and read so many newspapers and sit back and watch so many sunsets, you do get to ask without a plan, what's next? Well, you got a plan. What are you going to do? And more importantly, for you, for hospitality, you need to plan, what are my guests going to do? Here is a huge opportunity and a bit of a perfect storm in a positive way for us. We have all this magical AR stuff that's floating all around. Good gosh, anything should start with the preface AI, the way people talk. That you just saw it at the conferences and the buzzwords, and you have people walking around going, oh, we do AI. Great. And the tools function of AI is really fun. Specific usage of tool things. And one of them is the ability to create good and proofread copy that you then make sure sounds like you, walks like you, quacks like you, whatever. You take what's given and you make sure it is representative of you, but you can generate copious amounts of content. In the same time, it used to generate smaller amounts of content because you had to write it from beginning to end. With that, you can now take and turn what you're doing and start expanding your role in your market for your product in telling what else to do. Even if you're in the middle of nowhere, say you're sitting and say, hey, that's great, Loren. Sure, but I'm in the middle of nowhere. The people that stay with me is because they're going someplace else. Great. Where are they going? Where are they coming from? Why are they going there? And why do they come from where they're at? And both of those sides, you actually have a benefit because you don't have to worry about being at the place where they go, and you don't have to necessarily be from the place that they're leaving, which means they're not going to stay with you. You have the benefit of being in the middle of that. You get both ends because wherever they go to, they have to come from. So you get to go both on that in the sense of where they come from. You get to catch them on the way they're going, and you get to catch them on the way back. And the more you can validate that value by showing up content and giving the value proposition of, hey, if you're going to such and such, we're your perfect stop. We have great gas prices here at the current prices, or whatever tags and hicks you have. While you're here, spend a couple extra hours because it's a really cool walk. If you go up this hill, catch this sunset, or whatever it is, it can be as small as that. But it makes it interesting for the people that are looking to do something that they weren't doing before or found out something they didn't know before to get wherever they're going to anyway. And of course, if you can connect yourself in relationship to where these people are going as a destination and showing your value proposition in that process, this is your chance to drive content to it because you're going to have a lot of bored people coming up. To make it a simple statement, as much as there are other shows to watch, as much as the reruns start to watch, you're going to see a shift in shows, reruns, subscriptions to these things. It's not just whether you cancel your cable anymore. That used to be the old saying. It's like, well, there's not enough anything worth going on, 110 channels, I'm just going to cancel cable. The way that we're fed data now in entertainment is different than the cables before. Cable used to be, back in the days of, and progressions thereof, you had to catch the show when it was a show. You had to see that it was scheduled to put it on your VCR or whatever it was. That's different now than, hey, there's a show that I've never seen before, and all episodes, seasonal or not, are all there, and you get to watch and binge and all this other stuff. Also, to social, constant dialogue. There's going to be an interesting shift in social because a lot of the social related to shows and buzz and chitter chatter and influencer stuff and everything is all about being seen and being heard. Well, now there's less to talk about. There's going to be a flux of traffic. There's going to be possibly bored people that will spend more time on social, but they're still going to be bored with the content on social if there's not much to talk about. The other of it is that they might just say, let's take a break from social. There's nothing really going on. There's nothing to talk about. I'm not, the groups I follow that follow the shows I do or there's nothing to talk about, whatever. And they might look for alternative entertainment. They might cancel their subscriptions to a lot of entertainment, or they might just keep them hoping to watch other shows. Two things will happen to us from a marketing perspective. One is some channels might get more affordable for us to be on, and it gets us a chance to get in front of more people than we would have had before. And I speak directly about OTT and CTV and those advertisement mediums. It might make easier costs to get in front of people on social because other larger groups are not spending as much money because there's nothing for them to sell. The entertainment industry and things related to the entertainment industry will back off on any marketing because there's nothing to truly market at this point, new anyway. And so it might make it more affordable for you to get in front of more people. I still remember to this day when 2008 happened and the company I was working with basically gutted any spend on marketing. No, the economy took a tank. We're going to save our money. We're batting down the hatches. And I was furious. I was fighting in the trenches for inches to market share against my competitors. And I saw my competitors, they did the same thing. They stopped spending money. I'm like, oh my God, we can stand out of the trench and literally take over the whole country and dominate in front of all the audience that's out there because our competitors stopped spending money. And it's going to cost a fraction compared to what we were just spending before to try to gain an inch. No, Lauren, we're not going to do it. We're going to weather this out. And then when he comes back, we're going to come back again. And I thought it was the dumbest and still think it was the worst move to make. It could have been a massive expansion of market presence. It could have pushed over the top so many things about their soft brand and everything else. Didn't do it. I have the same logic to this now. If you're going to recoil and say, well, if everybody else is not spending the money and it's just people aren't doing what they're doing before, I'm not going to spend money to do it. We're going to save our money and wait until this disruption in our business cycle passes. Worst case to do. Be creative. Look at the alternatives of how you can put yourself in front of people that may not have even considered you before. But then again, we didn't consider that we'd be dealing with a strike that would actually influence their daily routines as deeply as this is going to happen. And again, even if by the end of this broadcast, I find out that everybody came to terms with their contracts and everything else and everything's back on, it already has had a ripple effect. It will be a lesser effect because it didn't grow any larger than what it already did, but it still has an effect. So this still is valid to look at. How does these things change? How would this change our modality of marketing for the latter part of this year? Is there value into what's Loren's, soapboxing onto, let's look at what we can feature for people that might be interested in doing something that they didn't usually do this time last year, especially for the September, October months, pre-holiday. Because once Thanksgiving rolls through, I mean, after Labor Day, which is not really a push for travel day. It's not that people don't travel on Labor Day. It's just the whole idea of it, and compared to certain travel holidays, it's not one of the higher ones. But when you start getting into the fall season, and Halloween is the big kickoff, that starts the holiday season. Of course, the next one is Thanksgiving. You have Boxer Day and so forth. You Hanukkah, Christmas. That the last October, November. Those are our peak moments of holidays, event stuff. You get into more of the concert series. Right now, you have summer series of stuff, which I would definitively say is being changed in the audience makeup because it is still entertainment. The musicians are still playing. So for that, the entertainment series might be interesting. Anything that you're doing for a Summerfest might have a whole different scope to it, because people might say, you know what, rather than watch the new episodes, they're just going to be on demand for me later. Let's savor those and let's go do something while we still have options available for summer. There's so many ways to look at the variations that this creates. So when I say market changes, those are market changes. The other thing, not to forget the early part of our discussion, the interest rates associated with financing and the budgets that are going to be rolling out for our budget season, August and September and so forth, are going to affect our modalities too, because it's going to dictate how we spend money this year. If it's perceived in a negative, neutral plateau way with very little growth, there's going to be a need or desire or want or mandate to start shoring up costs now, build a war chest for next year. If it's seen as being moderately optimistic and or progressively growth oriented because of the downturn potential of this year, the upturn will happen afterwards. It's a rubber band effect. Then there might be a willingness to continue operating at the budgets that are defined for this year or not. That's for your own company to decide and yours to advocate for. But I can say that ignoring it or not being a part of that conversation is the deadliest thing to do. So many properties I know of, the property is considered, they're myopic as to what they're doing. They're worried about their front desk being at the front desk, their housekeepers doing housekeeping, and the grass being mowed and the windows being cleaned. All things that they need to worry about, but that's all they worry about. And then myopic, it's not my responsibility to generate revenue outside my doors. I'll take care of revenue inside my doors. I'll optimize whatever I can do for the people that are on my doorstep, but I'm not in the business of worrying about my marketing, my markets, my demands, nothing other than what my salespeople is told. And those salespeople usually will talk to the corporate people, the management team, or the ownership group. And I only understand what's going on from what they tell me. These are stories I hear a lot from properties. So it's not as if I'm speaking alien to a lot of places when I say that it's up to you to decide where you step into that dialogue. Be that person that asks the question. Be that person that advocates the position of the property. Ask them to validate why they're making the financial decisions that they're doing. And if they've resigned, say, well, that's what we're told. Not a good enough answer. Well, they're only giving us this much money. Validate why they've only allocated this much. Be that person. And you say, well, that's job suicide, or that's career dampening decisions. I can guarantee you, through the history of what I've done, that the GMs that went over and said the internet is not my thing. I don't know anything about the internet, World Wide Web, nothing. I run hotels. They don't have jobs anymore because it required the people that ran hotels to know what the internet, World Wide Web thing was. For the GMs that said this technology stuff is not me. I'm a credit card slider, keys in the bin person. This whole magic key things and blah blah blah. That's technology I think is an overkill and unnecessary. They don't have jobs anymore because they didn't realize how the industry is changing and the usages of technology. As much as I bash AI, and as much as I bash how AI is being used, and I'm justified in my mind for saying both of those things, it's not to say I'm trying to stick my head in the sand and not say AI isn't where things are going to go. I'm just saying the hype of AI has to be moderated. The excuse of AI being the thing you should do and ignore anything else to now because that's the thing you should do is shiny object syndrome. If you're not doing the things you need to do without AI isn't going to fix all that stuff. That's what I'm saying right now. But the idea of what AI can do for you, I use AI in different tools. The fact of what AI will become is yet to be determined. Don't let anybody think that they're going to tell you what they know it's going to do. They don't. Nobody does. It's an untamed quantity for so many people as to the scope of what AI will be involved with. And don't think it's just Chat GPT or something. There's dozens, hundreds of AI tools. They're all based on the same similar modeling for different functions. So when it comes to these things about what the rest of your year looks like, don't look at it like, well, I already have a budget for it. We already have a forecast roll through September, now October, or coming into October. There's little changes to the path. We're on the route. We're in the groove. Take my hands off the steering wheel. I'm being driven by Jesus. It's not true. There's enough that has changed that you should raise your hand and ask, are we doing good with our current strategy? Are we making sure that what we're doing now fits what we think is happening that it's covering? The budget, the forecast, marketing spend, targeting, marketing message, content. Are all those things still as viable as they were before these changes? From my perspective, no. Unless you plan for this to happen, which would be, good gosh, give me the lottery numbers for Mega Millions and Powerball today. Unless you have that pre-planned that, which I don't know if anybody would, maybe AI would. Anyways, the idea is you need to be critical of your strategies now to see if they're still valid for the impacts. And maybe there is no impact for you. Maybe you're looking at it like, look, I'm in my groove of what I have. My mix of business is not changing because of these changes. I'm a heavy group, heavy corp. The changes to those types of things are not affecting my group business. I'm not a Comic-Con hotel. I'm not a movie set crew hotel. None of those things have a direct impact to me. Those are just simple examples. There's more complex examples. I'm pretty good with that. And then my other markets are predefined by consortia and wholesalers because of my demand cycle by season. I have certain event-driven things that aren't changing because of any of these circumstances. So, Loren, what you're saying is not necessarily true. Yes, you're right. But maybe there's a different shift in opportunities that other hotels that are affected by those things that are your competitors, you might find there's opportunity to yield higher market share by just acknowledging that there's different ways of approaching communication about the changes that are affected in your market. It may not affect your business, but it may affect your market. And if you still don't think it affects your market, like, hey, I'm in such and such place, none of this makes a difference. What are your compression markets from you? What are your markets that compress business to you? Some businesses are outside of a certain metro. That metro has issues that changes the influx of demand to their market. It is a ripple. We're all a connected group. And so for that reason, even if you isolate, that doesn't affect your particular property. Even if you isolate, it doesn't affect your particular competitors. Even if you isolate, that doesn't affect your actual destination market. Maybe it affects another market that puts you into a different light for the displacement of that market's displacement. And on and on and on. So with that, I believe we've hit the three ways I wanted to talk about this: budget, forecast, and marketing changes for being what it is, July 14th. Just before we get into the budget season, just after we get the latest reports of what forecasting would be, and just in the middle of the changes of things that we talked about with the strikes for the entertainment industry. So with that, I do sincerely appreciate your time listening to us live, watching us on TV, or watching us on your social media of choice. As I mentioned before, we do simulcast this on our Hospitality Channel TV station, which is available on Roku TV, Google TV, Amazon TV, Apple TV, Samsung TV. It is a channel you just simply look for channels, download it. The show is always on the free side of it. There is a pay gateway. There is more content behind it. If you're interested, it's all about the hospitality industry. It's not consumer generated like, hey, this is diners, drive-ins, and dives or something. It's about hospitality industry stuff. If you are a hospitality marketing professional and want to join our peer group, which is a lot of fun, we're not teaching basics of digital marketing for hospitality. We're not saying this is what CPC stands for or anything. You have to already be knowing those things. You have to be past the basic introductory level. There's plenty of people out there that teach a variety of useful and non-useful basic understandings of digital marketing for hospitality. You have to already know this kind of stuff. Matter of fact, there's a quiz. You put your email in the little place, go to hospitalitymarketing.club, put your email in, I send you a quiz, you get 90% or more, meaning that you understand marketing for hospitality. You get joined into the club. It's a private group. We talk about how to make complex solutions or solve complex problems, whichever way you want to look at it. That's there. Of course, if you want to watch this show and all of its glory for 10 years of doing this, well, we're actually going into our 10th year next month, August. But we do this every week, have been doing it every week, regardless of where. We've done it all around the world. You can go to hospitalitychannel.tv. It's our I Love Lucy rerun channel. There you'll get every one of our shows categorized by our guest hosts, topics, and data broadcasts. And also all of our podcasts. We do have an audio podcast. It will follow up to this one. We get a little more granular about tools and how to use those tools and some news items. And that is the Hospitality Marketing Podcast. It's available on 39 different platforms. But you also can get any of the reruns off of the hospitalitychannel.tv website as well. If you do want to see our app, it's an iOS app, actually, Hospitality Channel. You can find it on Apple iOS or Android. And you can go online at talktravel.tv. If you have any feedback for me, I take and answer every email that's sent to me, Loren at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. I also have an open channel of audio feedback, which you can actually join our show at any time you would like. And that is at hdm.news/talkback. I usually every week throw up a question to be answered and an open session for you to give me any sort of feedback or insights, questions, or whatever. And then you tell me whether or not I can use you by name, play the audio back, or just refer to what you were talking about. So you have that as a channel as well. So with all of that disclaimer and boilerplate information, my name is Loren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.